You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. This month, we are talking about all films about films, about making films. We're calling this our behind the scenes month, and we're talking about a few of our favorites of movies that are about making movies. And we're kicking it off with the 1995 film Get Shorty, directed by Barry Sonnefeld, starring John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Rene, Russo, Danny DeVito, LAX Rounded, Dennis Farina. It was produced by Danny DeVito. Actually, Barry Sonnefeld read the Elmore Leonard book that this movie is based on and called up Danny and said, you have to buy this film and you will be the starring role. You'll be Chili Palmer. And then there was a conflict. Danny was directing Matilda and couldn't appear. And so Barry, I think, had seen a pre-release or he had seen a version of Pulp Fiction. And so he knew that John Travolta could play the part. And so they hired John Travolta, and then Danny played, oh, how funny. I wrote Danny played Danny DeVito, but he didn't. Do you remember his character's name?
Martin Weir.
Yeah, he played Martin Weir. So the synopsis of the film is a mobster travels to Hollywood to collect a debt and discovers that the movie business is much the same as his current job in being a mobster. The tagline is drug smuggling, racketeering, loan sharking, welcome to Hollywood.
That sounds like a normal studio, right?
Right. The mob is tough, but it's nothing like show business is another one.
So interesting fun fact is often behind the scenes is abbreviated to BTS.
Yes.
Which also is the initials of Brian Trenchard Smith, a director that we are familiar with.
Yes, a local. Well, I guess he's an Australian that has now become local.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Shout out to BTS.
Yeah. And even though you don't know anything about if you don't know anything about the entertainment business, you can still enjoy this film. No inside knowledge is needed. And some describe this film as Pulp Fiction meets The Player, which ironically, The Player is the film that will close out this month of movies about making movies.
Right. And there's a bit of fun trivia to listen for in the episode about The Player.
Okay. Mike, kick us off. What is the pickup line for this film?
It's f***ing cold outside.
Oh, which is ironic because it takes place in Miami, correct?
Mostly in Hollywood, but it starts in Miami. And I will say that there's a little bit of meteorological movie magic in this because it rains in LA during the film. And I can tell you, it never rains in LA under any circumstances.
It occasionally rains.
Okay, once every century.
You don't remember the days that it rain, but I know it rains because I listened to a podcast that is filmed down there and they talk about it raining.
I think there's actually just a bunch of grips standing outside the window with that bar attached to the hose.
Okay. According to Elmore Leonard, Martin Weir's character is based on Leonard's own dealings with Dustin Hoffman, which does not bode well for Mr. Hoffman after you see this film.
I've read quite a few different people say that working with Mr. Hoffman is challenging.
Right. And another little note of casting, a couple notes, is James Gandolfini is in this film as the character Bear, and they originally wanted John Goodman, but he was otherwise occupied. And John Travolta was going to decline this movie, but it was Quentin Tarantino that convinced him to do it.
Yeah, because Quentin is familiar with movies in which people get shot.
Yeah. And the shot of Chili and Harry driving through LA was filmed over 2 days because it was being constantly interrupted by passerbys congratulating Travolta on his recent Oscar nomination for Pulp Fiction. Tarantino, interestingly enough, directed another film that was based on an Elmore Leonard book, Jackie Brown. So that are my little tidbits from the category of acting. Shall we move on to cinematography?
Sure.
I noticed right off the bat a lot of angles from a low perspective or a high perspective.
Yeah. There's a really nice overhead of the studio lot near the end.
Uh-huh.
But then there's a good tracking shot when Chili gets out of the car and goes into the hotel that they said in the trivia the cameraman rode on like a little running board on the car and then basically stepped off to follow Chili into the hotel. It was kind of a clever shot.
Right. But then there's the scene, Chili comes into the home where Rene Russo's character is, and she's in this almost like little balcony outside a bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing it from Chili's POV looking up at her, and then we're seeing her POV looking down at Chili. And I just noticed throughout, when they're at the restaurant, this restaurant has 2 stories, and there's like a staircase. I can't remember if it was a spiral staircase, but oftentimes we're either on the first floor looking up at a steep angle at the 2nd floor, or vice versa. And then it happened again in the warehouse. There were like these steep angle shots. Yes, I'm going to... There really wasn't a place to put it, although I do have a note here at the end of the cinematography section. Let's go into writing. What things did you notice about the writing?
Chili's first line is that they're closing down a movie theater. So even though that's not the pickup line, the first line from the main character establishes that film is going to be a key element of this, which I thought was interesting. And there is some interesting dialogue that they had in there, which I think is kind of funny. I don't know if Elmore Leonard is known for his humor, but he has things like, I don't think a producer has to know so much.
Yeah.
And just put in the commas and fix the spelling. That was what was required for screenwriting, which from a writer, of course, is funny. And then I really liked, what's the point of living in LA if you're not in the movie business? Right?
Yeah.
But I may have to go back to loan sharking to get a rest. I think the person who wrote this was pretty cynical on Hollywood in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did read an Elmore Leonard book, Rum Punch, and I do remember him being somewhat sarcastic in it. So I think, and like I said earlier, if this is his dealings with Dustin Hoffman, and we know Dustin Hoffman was problematic, then I think he probably doesn't have a great impression of Hollywood.
And Danny DeVito is kind of known for not being overly tall, but I think Dustin Hoffman also is on the shorter side.
Right.
And I wondered how much of that character was kind of biographical of his dealings with Dustin Hoffman, which wouldn't be very good for Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, what else did you like about the writing?
Well, I don't know where you would qualify this, whether this is writing or directing, but the final note that I had down here is that I noticed that there was the same 2 or 3 Marines in full dress blues in the shot, every single shot at LAX. And I thought, why would those Marines be there for days on end? Right? I mean, we understood why the undercover cops were there staking out the locker, but I think what it is they probably shot it on a single day, and those guys were hanging out, had nothing better to do, and volunteered to be extras. And they're just so distinctive in their uniforms that it stuck out to me. But I always wonder, was there a deleted scene that explained why these same 3 Marines were in LAX for days on end?
I just have a note in writing. It says, Jesus Christ, where did you get these names? I don't know if that was in reference to a script. I don't know if it was Chili Palmer. I mean, but he's a character. He's not one of the... That must have been something like Gene Hackman said or something.
It's possible he was looking at the screenplay, because remember, they were all trying to make that one film.
Yeah. There's a really long opening sequence, and you noted that we were 7 minutes in before we even get to the title sequence.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty deep into the film before we actually got the title sequence.
Right. I wonder if they were doing that because is that the moment when they went from Miami to LA?
Oh, right. I didn't make a note of that.
And so is that kind of the transition so that the audience realizes we've changed locations, from one side of the country to the other?
Right. It's a natural break.
Right. There were a couple cameos, and Bette Midler was one of them, and I loved it. And Gene Hackman really enjoyed filming with her, and he asked Danny to put her in more because he just loved being in scenes with her. And I loved her line. She comes into his office, and she says, I like the walls. My favorite color, putty.
Yeah, that's a great line.
And I realized that there is like this gross beige that if you think about it is in a lot of movies. And it's usually like an industrial office or like a tenement apartment. It's just like this really gross beige, and it's not bright. It looks like it's been there for like 20 years. And I was like, oh yeah, that is in a lot of movies.
remember when computer cases were all that ugly color?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And I think it's the same reason. I think pure white is hard to keep clean. So they go with this weird off-white because the thought is when it gets dirty, it won't be as obvious because it already looked horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really thought the set designers and set dressers probably had a lot of fun with the Gene Hackman character's office as a producer. There was a lot of fun memorabilia that was around. And one thing I noticed immediately was the round top door. To me, I associate that with Los Angeles. I'm sure Adam Carolla could tell me the architectural history of that, but I've only ever seen that in California homes. They're always wood, and so it looks kind of like Spanish Revival, but it's got that round top to it. But one thing that I thought was really quite subtle but great was there's a framed photo of Harry in his office, but it's too big for the frame, or it's the wrong size for the frame. You can see it doesn't fit the frame. And I thought that was hilarious. It shows so much about the character that he can't either get the right size photo or the right size frame. It's just like, I got this headshot and I'll put it in here. There you go. Whatever.
So we've really been enjoying the TV version. What is it? It's on Hulu, I think, with Chris O'Dowd and Ray Romano. I think it's on Hulu.
I actually don't remember. It's on one of the streaming services.
I could look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. And I think it's easy to see where they got certain characters. Chris O'Dowd is obviously portraying, I don't believe his name is Chili Palmer in the TV show.
I don't think so. No, now that you mention it.
But those characters are similar. And then Gene Hackman's character is the Ray Romano character.
Yes.
And instead of the mob, it's like the Mexican drug cartel or the Colombian drug cartel. And they modernized it, obviously, and it's really funny. So check that out. How did you think that this film played today?
I thought it played pretty well. There were a couple things that stuck out from its era. One is there is a lot of cigarette smoking throughout the film.
Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily bump me, but it's just I noticed it when I saw it, like, oh, they don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is there's a line where one of the characters, I think it was Chili, says, oh, he's a colored guy, though. And I don't know that we would deliver that dialogue today, even though it's probably not unrealistic for the character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did we have any head trauma?
I did not note any head trauma, which is amazing. I probably didn't mark it down because it's people get, like Harry, Gene Hackman's character, gets the crap beat out of him in his office. But I didn't mark down a time code for that, but that probably counts as some head trauma.
Oh, there's some pretty bad head trauma when Dennis Farina is trying to sneak up. So when they're in Miami, he steals Chili's coat. Chili goes to get it back, punches him in the nose, and he comes to Chili's office to basically say, like, why did you break my nose? That's not cool. And he's trying to sneak up on him, and Chili's in an office in the back. And when Farina opens the door, he shoots him, like, and I don't know how you would do this, but the bullet grazes the top of his head, but enough that I would call that head trauma.
Yeah, I think it's accidental that you can just graze. I mean, unless he's a really, really good shot.
Right.
Also, I think now that we talk about it, there was some head trauma. Didn't Dennis Farina's character sucker punch some poor lady in Miami when he was trying to find out where Chili went? Yeah, that's a little rough.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
not
a lot.
Cool.
I apologize to the listeners that I did not mark down the time codes for apparently quite a bit of head trauma.
For all the violence. How about the smoochie? Did you catch a smooch?
Smoochy, smoochy, smoochy.
Checking my notes. I do not have smoochie written down either, and I'm trying to think. I don't think I missed anything. There is implied canoodling between Rene Russo's character and Gene Hackman's character, but I don't know that we ever saw a smooch.
How about a driving review?
So, gotta love the line, Oldsmobile silhouette, it's the Cadillac of minivans. That was a great line. I actually think that's a great vehicle for being incognito. I'm not sure why more criminals didn't use minivans, because no one suspects a minivan. Plus, it's got a lot of room. You can put a lot of goons in there, maybe some weaponry. I thought it was a nice set design, really, in some sense, to have that battered Mercedes convertible, because it showed that Harry was at one time kind of a thing, but then like the convertible part is patched, which is just miserable. So it shows that he's fallen on hard times. It was a good job of showing, not telling. But I will say, Ronnie does not safely operate the Porsche 911 when he's driving it. Not good driving. A thumbs down for Ronnie.
Ronnie who?
Ronnie is, I think, Bear's assistant.
Oh, okay.
He's the guy who appeared in the Mike White Hawaii series recently.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Is there anything else you want to share about this movie before we go to the numbers?
I think that'll do. Let's go to the numbers.
Okay. Like I said, this film came out in 1995. It had a budget of $30 million. Domestically, it made $72 million, and worldwide, it made $115 million. So definitely, I would call that a success when you 5x your initial investment, or I guess not 5x, 4x. It got a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb, and on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics enjoyed it, I would say 88%, and the audience not as much, it's 70%. It's an hour and 45 minutes. It's rated R. It's tagged as a comedy crime thriller, and we only paused it once to check the time and share some trivia. We watched it on Amazon Prime. It's free right now, so if you want to check it out, you won't have to pony up any dollars if you already subscribed to Amazon Prime, that is. Join us next week when we will be talking about In a World, a film that we have loved for quite a while about the voiceover industry. And never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.